The three people I'll be talking about today are all notorious for being criminals and doing many horrible things. But even the most hardened criminals can show decency and compassion. In this video, I'll be sharing 3 stories of notoriously bad people who did good things. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Derek, and if you've seen my videos before, welcome back. If this is your first time here, it's great to have you. If you enjoy stories that are crazy and true as much as I do, then you're in the right place. And the good news is I upload new videos each and every week. So to make sure you don't miss any, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you'll know when new crazy and true stories are uploaded. All right, let's get started with today's stories. When we think of serial killers, Ted Bundy is likely the first one that comes to mind. He confessed to murdering 30 women during a 5-year span before being put to death. This admission was shocking, especially to the many people who knew him. Many of them knew how intelligent he was, how much he had going for him, and many believed that he was one of the nicest and most caring people that they had ever met. Well, most people don't know this, but before Bundy's criminal acts, he demonstrated a caring and compassionate side by working for a suicide helpline. While attending college at the University of Washington, where he was majoring in psychology, he worked at the Suicide Hotline Crisis Center in Seattle. At the center, he took phone calls and helped people work through suicidal thoughts and other emotional difficulties they were going through. One lady he worked alongside at the center was named Ann Rule. She was a former police officer and was also the author of true crime stories. She was really impressed with the way that Bundy carried himself, and the two formed a friendship during their time working together. Well, years after working with him and the truth of his crimes coming to light, Ann wrote a well-known book titled The Stranger Beside Me. In the book, she discussed their friendship and admitted that she would have trusted him to care for the young children she had at the time. She shared that Bundy took his job at the suicide hotline very seriously, and that he was kind and empathetic with those that he talked to and worked with. Ann also shared in her book that when work would end at the center, sometimes really late at night, Bundy would walk her to her car to make sure that she was able to get home safely. In her book, Ann acknowledged the many lives he took, but she also made the point to emphasize that he also saved lives while working for the hotline. So the question is, how could Bundy go from saving lives to taking lives? It's not exactly known, but some psychologists believe that he may have taken the job at the suicide hotline in an effort to make him a more skilled serial killer. How so? To put himself in a position to talk to normal people, learn what these people are like and how they feel, and fake the different emotions he learned. All of this in an effort to help him better blend into society and persuade the vulnerable. What do you think? Was Bundy sincere during his time working at the hotline, or was it part of another motive? You decide. During the later part of the 19th century, Jesse James became one of America's most infamous outlaws. Together with his brother Frank, the pair robbed banks, trains, and stagecoaches throughout the Midwest. After being shot and killed in 1882, Jesse James became a legendary figure in the Wild West. However, while Jesse and Frank spent most of their time breaking laws, scouting out their next victims, and evading authorities, they found time to help one elderly widow who was in desperate need. Zerelda Hart was living alone in her small cabin and was struggling to get by. Her husband had died a few years earlier. She had no family close by and could sometimes go weeks without seeing another face. Despite her circumstances, she tried to give and help where she could. One cold, rainy night in 1870, there was pounding on her door. Her cabin was in a remote area, with the closest neighbors being 40 miles away. She opened the door and was surprised to see 2 men standing there. The 2 men were Jesse and Frank James. They asked if they could come inside and warm up, and being the kind of woman that Zerelda was, she invited them inside and made them feel at home. She had no idea who the 2 men were. She introduced herself, but Jesse and Frank made sure that they didn't let her know who they were. She started a fire for them and gave them a dry change of clothing. After feeding them some dinner, she asked them some questions to get to know them, but she couldn't understand why they seemed so secretive. To avoid any attention on themselves, they asked her questions such as how long she had lived there and why she was alone. She told them that she had lived in the cabin ever since her husband had built it 20 years earlier. but that he had passed away and that she had been alone ever since. She told them about the great memories she had in the home, and then she became emotional. The James brothers asked her what was wrong, and she told them that she and her husband never had very much money, and that things got really bad after he passed. She told them she had to borrow $900, which was a small fortune back in that time, in order to get by. She had to put her house and land up as collateral, and it was now time for her to pay that money back, or her home would be seized the following day. She told them through tears that she had absolutely no way to pay it. The brothers, who were touched by what she had shared with them, asked her where she would go, and she told them she didn't know. She apologized for burdening them with her story, and told them to get some good rest, and she would have breakfast ready for them in the morning. Well, when Zerelda woke up the next morning to make breakfast, she was surprised to see that the James brothers were gone. She felt bad that they left, and she hadn't found out who they were. She walked over to her kitchen table and was surprised to see some money. When she counted it, she could not believe that there were 9 $100 bills, just what she needed to give the collector that was going to be arriving at any moment. With the money was a note from Jesse and Frank. Of course, they didn't sign their names to it, but they thanked her for her hospitality and told her to make sure she asks the banker for a receipt. Well, shortly after, a man from the bank arrived with foreclosure papers. When Zerelda gave him the $900, he couldn't believe it. He didn't understand how she was able to pay the full amount, but she fulfilled her obligation. She asked for a receipt, and he gave her one, even though he thought it was an odd request. On his way back to the bank, 2 men on horseback came out of the woods, firing their guns in the air and telling him to stop. They told him to hand the money over, to which he did. He told them that they were going to be in a lot of trouble and that there would be a price placed on their heads. They told him that they already had a price placed on their heads, and that's when they revealed that they were Jesse and Frank James. They took off on their horses and disappeared back into the woods. Al Capone was one of the most famous American gangsters in American history. He reigned as a crime boss for 7 years before going to prison at the age of 33. While he lived a short life filled with crime, he was known for being charismatic and somewhat of a celebrity. He enjoyed receiving attention and recognition, and one of the main reasons why he attended sporting events was to revel in cheers that he'd receive from spectators. With some of the fortune he made being a crime boss, he donated to various charities. Many viewed him at that time as a modern-day Robin Hood, until his public image was damaged after his crimes and dealings came to light. To help clean up his image, Capone started one of the first soup kitchens in 1930 in Chicago. The Great Depression was going on during this time, and the soup kitchen provided free soup, coffee, and donuts to those who were homeless and poor. For some that were unemployed during that time, Al Capone's soup kitchen provided some of the only meals they received. The kitchen served breakfast, lunch, and dinner to more than 2,200 people each day. The kitchen also provided employment to a number of people who wouldn't have been able to find work otherwise. The soup kitchen served tens of thousands of free meals. In fact, the largest paper in Chicago at the time published a headline that the kitchen served more than 120,000 meals to people in need. Those that were less fortunate praised Capone and told the newspapers that he was doing more for those in need than the entire United States government was. Capone enjoyed the good publicity he was receiving while also being able to help those in need. He would visit the kitchen often and devote time to speak to the people there. He'd offer a smile and a handshake and also offer words of encouragement. For many people, that was enough to give them hope and keep them going during a very difficult time. Capone ended up being sentenced to prison in 1932. 2 years after opening the kitchen. The kitchen served a great purpose for a number of years until it was demolished in the 1950s, a few years after Capone's death. That wraps up the stories for this episode. Which story were you most surprised by? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for joining me today, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you can join me for more crazy and true stories. Also, don't forget to drop a like on this video, and if you have a story suggestion or topic you'd like to pass along, drop it in the comments or send it to the email address in the description. Until next time, have fun and stay safe.